What's up, everybody? This is Beau from GrowActive Solutions. Today we are going to be interviewing JT from Mushrooms Naturally and Full Cycle Living Soil. We're doing this at our event called Mushroom Church, where JT is going to be running through a bunch of, everything on how to grow mushrooms right at home. If you guys want to, you can check out other videos that we have on the GrowActive YouTube channel that has, the full Mushroom Church. It's like 2 hours long, and we're going to be putting up more and more content with that. So I guess without further ado, let me introduce JT from Mushrooms Naturally. What's up, JT?
Hi, thanks, Beau, for having me out again. My name's JT. I am with Mushrooms Naturally. We also produce Full Cycle Living Soil. I guess a little bit about me and the farm.
Yeah. Why don't you give us just some background on what is Mushrooms Naturally?
So I started Mushrooms Naturally about 8 years ago. I began growing mushrooms closer to 10 years ago. I was working as a chef full time. I'd been a chef, went to culinary school, was pretty established in the kitchen, and my wife and I had just bought our first house. And so it was coming up on, late fall time, kind of wrapping up the garden kind of thing. And I had always been into gardening and plants and growing. And so I found this grow your own mushroom kit on a website that has you save coffee grounds. While working at a country club, we used to go through tons of coffee grounds. So I'm like, why not? I'll give this a little bit of a go. And, back then there wasn't a ton of information on home growing and stuff. And so I found a couple YouTube videos and slowly turned my basement into a mushroom farm, and then, got told to get out of the basement with the mushroom farm. And I moved into our warehouse where we're at now in O'Fallon, Missouri, and that was about 8 years ago. So right now we sell to about 40 different restaurants in the area. We do the Lake St. Louis Farmers Market, and then we also are educating home growers.
Absolutely. It's one of the cool things, and congratulations, but Mushrooms actually did just get a write-up in
Feast.
Feast magazine, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So congratulations.
It's always nice because we do a lot of work with a lot of these restaurants that get recognized, often for how well loved they are by the community and all that stuff, and then on occasion, some of the chefs and restaurant owners do like to highlight and pass on some of the the farmers that they work with locally. And a couple of our local chefs just kind of turned on our business to them, and they decided to follow up and do that nice little article about us. So it was great. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, that was really cool to check that out.
Yeah, it just kind of goes through a little bit of the history like we just talked about, and kind of how we got started growing, and mostly just kind of talks about all the different products that we do now. What started out as just singularly growing mushrooms, for culinary purpose to sell to chefs, has now turned into quite a bit of range as far as mushroom and mushroom-related products. So,
mushrooms and mushroom-related products.
We are all things fungi out there, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you went to culinary school. Why don't you kind of take us just through the trip of JT?
Yeah.
You give us a little bit of background on how Mushrooms Naturally got started, but what got you into mushrooms?
Really go? Yeah. So I grew up kind of on the edge of the suburbs, so it was often heavy wooded areas and stuff. So as a little kid, I always grew up just playing in the woods. Always had friends that lived kind of out a little bit further, and we'd spend hours outside. And I remember now, especially looking back, just always noticing mushrooms and them always just kind of being interesting to me. And then in high school, I had friends whose father would take us out mushroom hunting, in the springtime to go hunt for morels. And I was always into food at that point, and we'd go back and his mom would fry them up, and it would be a big thing. It was like a celebration of finding these mushrooms, and
wow.
It always just kind of resonated with me. And then as soon as I graduated high school, I started culinary school, and then I started out at the country club, and we would get some of the top ingredients around, being a country club and having that kind of expense. So there was a couple local companies we would see from, and then foragers from the area would bring these mushrooms into the country club. And so for me firsthand to see these more exotic types of mushrooms that, you know, don't often get seen by the general public or in grocery stores, and being able to cook with them and learn about them and see the flavor difference and see all of this stuff had always caught my attention, you know. And then, like I said, just having that opportunity and, you know, finding this grow your own mushroom kit was just kind of the catalyst to kind of kickstart the the now rabbit hole that we are fully down. So
definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I think that's one of the cool things that when I first came out to Mushrooms Naturally's farm, right, and you gave me the tour, I think that was one of the really cool things is, you know, I like to think of myself as not necessarily a foodie, but I do love to eat, right? Yeah. And you showing me these different types of mushrooms and going home and being able to experiment with those different flavors, right? It was really eye-opening compared to what's just available in the grocery store.
And it's funny because, you know, coming from a chef's perspective, it's pretty easy to persuade people who often have an image of mushrooms or a dislike for mushrooms for a number of reasons, you know, texture, or, you know, they taste like dirt, or all of these kind of excuses that people have because they've just never really had different varieties of mushrooms. You know, our hen of the woods, when, you know, grilled or roasted or something, is more like a high-end piece of meat that you would get at a restaurant versus, you know, just a common everyday portobello mushroom. So to be able to kind of see people at the farmer's market and turn people on to these mushrooms, and especially recently within the last couple of years with how popular mushrooms just have become in general, you know, with documentaries on Netflix and everything else coming out, you know, just making people more aware of not just the fact that there are button mushrooms in the grocery store, but there are all these mushrooms that have huge culinary benefits or health benefits or both.
Absolutely.
You know, and the health benefit side of things has really been one of the biggest learning curves for me because, you know, coming from a culinary standpoint, we were also focused on just growing the best quality mushroom chefs were looking for. But nowadays, people are so into the holistic and natural side of all the medicinal properties that mushrooms have, things like reishi, lion's mane, turkey tail, all of these mushrooms that are mostly just grown for health benefits and not necessarily their culinary benefits, has been a whole new, you know, subject that we're trying to get into and learn about.
Absolutely. You know, I think that's really exciting to just see everything that's going on in the mushroom world at the moment, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many pockets of different people that are trying to use this for different purposes, right? And they keep pushing the envelope. It's very exciting for me coming from kind of the cannabis world, right?
Sure.
To me, mushrooms are at a point where it's almost like the 90s for cannabis.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so everybody's learning different things on their own. You're back to having those like basement scientists that are just trying to push the boundaries of what they can do. And I think that's a really, really exciting time in the wellness, right? And what can these other naturally occurring, you know, just plants or fungus, right? You know, but just these naturally occurring, the benefits that we have from these things,
or just like the biological control projects that people are using, even so, using mycelium for insulation, for production products, you know, for replacing certain products, you know, not health benefit, not culinary, but for applications that are not only sustainable, but, you know, you're shipping your wine bottles in styrofoam now that's made of mushroom that will just turn back into dirt after a while.
Oh, wow.
There's so much what they call, you know, citizen mycology going on right now that it almost takes an ignorant person to discover something. You know, in my opinion, if you're so into an industry, it's hard to look at with fresh eyes. Yep. But so many people nowadays are trying all of these, you know, seemingly off the wall things with mycelium and mushrooms, and it just realizing that there is a limitless potential, you know, with everything out there. Not only are scientists discovering new varieties of mushrooms that do great things, you know, as far as fighting cancers and breaking down plastics and things like that, but just just the everyday citizen application to replacing and making things more sustainable using it is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I also, I was up in Humboldt probably a couple years ago, and I was introduced to this gentleman who is using mushroom blocks to help clean up oil spills.
Yeah.
Like in the waterways,
Yeah.
and take out, contaminants out of like the rivers and the creeks and stuff like that. And he basically just makes these huge mycelium logs that they like run across
That they
and
skim.
it filters.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's really freaking cool too.
That's what I'm saying, like those kind of like oil spill cleanup applications, without somebody like Paul Stamets to realize that these oyster mushrooms can break down petrocarb, base oily products into simpler things and make them, stable in nature and clean up diesel spills or things along those lines. It takes somebody not just trying to grow mushrooms for food or not just trying to grow mushrooms for medicine to think of these applications and stuff like that. That's kind of where our full cycle soil came from. We for the longest time, we would get all of this organic material, we would sterilize it, we would introduce all these varieties of mushrooms just like nature does to break, all of this cellulose and lignin down in this wood product, and then we would basically just kind of passively compost it, and it was more of an afterthought. And it took me educating myself more about soil biology and living soil and composting and getting into, cannabis growing and organic side of everything and learning, the difference between where all of this food comes naturally and basically just realizing that, geez, we've been doing a lot of this work naturally. We've been feeding, grain heavy material to mushrooms that naturally make phosphorus available. And that's huge. That's a huge source of phosphorus that was otherwise just completely unthought of, and passive. So it's just kind of diving into some of these more branched out ideas that come from just mushroom growing, even recycling the plastic that we grow the bags into to insulate our greenhouse, things that we can really just kind of capture, use, as much as we can and stay sustainable. It just mushrooms are the industry that are driving this thought.
Yes.
They're giving us this base product that has almost limitless applications.
Absolutely. That's kind of one of the cool things that that's why I wanted to start to support Mushrooms Naturally. I saw your guys' vision, and it was something that I wanted to get behind because everything that you do in your business is sustainable. You're constantly reusing, right. And I think that it's what this community is about,
sure.
Right? And so being able to take your spent mushroom blocks and being able to compost them down and create something else that we can grow, more food with.
Viable food source,
Absolutely. And it works pretty great for cannabis
yes.
too, right? Let's be honest here, right? So,
100%.
But I mean, with all of that, throughout that decomposition process, right? I mean, we're able to get, or you are able to get all types of native Missouri beneficials into there, bacteria, things that are going to actually thrive in this environment.
Naturally. Yes.
Exactly.
You're not picking up compost that was made in Vermont that is more cool weather, that's akin to a cooler climate, a saltier air, or anything along those lines. These are born and bred Missouri bacteria, fungi, all this natural stuff that we just encourage more of.
Absolutely. And again, I think that that's really cool that we have something like that here that's available to the home growers, to the gardeners, to the farmers.
Yeah. I mean, having soil that naturally has fungi that is used to fighting off powdery mildew is advantageous for if you're growing here in Missouri. Having soil that naturally deters predators, living organic biological controls that get rid of bad nematodes, things like that by having live active, microbes in the soil. It's just there's no downside to just encouraging more of it.
Absolutely. And you're not getting that when you're buying something bagged, like
Sure.
you said, where
Yeah.
it's being created someplace else.
Yeah.
That's a normal bagged soil. Yeah, they can throw some mycorrhizae, they can throw some
Absolutely.
bacillus, right?
Yep.
But being able to get those true Missouri, beneficials that are going to keep thriving in your garden is a big and huge benefit.
And the big thing about like that live active soil that we have established and created this whole system, and we are basically just having you plug into it.
Yes.
There is this feed of natural process that we have just kind of built on and piggybacked and gained throughout this process, and now it's done what nature does. It's broken down an entire tree and turned it into plant available food. So
definitely, I really like thinking about the biology in the sense of, say, like a network.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And seeing all of those, so like the different lines and
Yeah.
wires and connections, right? And being able to plug into that network when you transplant into a bag of full cycle soil is invaluable.
And it's funny because if you think about it, like the world's largest fungus or largest organism is a honey mushroom. So it covers about 2,000 square miles in Oregon. And it's no different than what we're doing. We're doing the work for the mushrooms. It's just like you see on some of those documentaries, like, have we been guided this whole way our whole lives to do, look what we're doing. We grow mushrooms to sell to people everywhere. We distribute it that way. We're doing their work by composting and feeding plants that will ultimately become more food for them. It really is, if you think about it, it's all just kind of an extension from that original process and thought that every bag has part of it, and if they all came back together, would just be part of it again.
Definitely. I like to always say that we are stewards of the plant.
Yeah.
Right? That is what we're here for,
Yep.
right? And you're the steward of the fungi,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And together, that is a symbiotic relationship
100%.
that just builds upon, right?
Yep. It's just made sense. So,
Definitely.
Yep.
So, yeah, man. I mean, I guess, going back into the culinary world real quick, right?
Yeah.
What is some of your favorites and what do you think is easy for people to start growing at home, and maybe even some of the ones that you have in like the ready to go
so
bags?
That's been our biggest translation for people that want to get established or started with growing mushrooms. It's the quickest, easiest way to kind of get your feet wet and learn how the growth cycle works towards the end of the life of mushrooms. So the grow kits have basically the same units, the same blocks that we use out at our farm to produce all of our mushrooms that we sell to all of the chefs and restaurants in town. It's the same thing. We grab one out of 200, and they just happen to wind up here as opposed to the farm. So they're ready to go, and it teaches you how to finish growing an oyster mushroom, and then you get to cook with it. So, some of our easier varieties like our oyster, shiitake, lion's mane, those are the ones that not only have people kind of started reading about, and hearing about the health benefits, but also the culinary benefits. So we, every weekend at the farmer's market, for instance, if there's a wild seasonal mushroom, like a lobster mushroom or a chicken of the woods that people just haven't seen or ever heard of, we try to do a recipe for, so people have something, to kind of inspire this weird mushroom into something, tasty. And that's kind of what these grow your own mushroom kits do, is it basically lets people just walk home with very little knowledge as far as how to grow mushrooms, other than you just have to spray it with water and kind of keep it alive to watch it grow. And that usually lets people that are interested in growing mushrooms kind of come to an event like our mushroom church today, or come out to the mushroom farm and do one of the cultivation classes and kind of get a little bit more, because mushrooms are not the easiest thing to grow. There's a lot of sterility, there's a lot of clean process and things like that go on. And that can be intimidating to people. But, for places like GrowActive here to have our sterilized media, to eliminate the part, that mushroom processing to get something clean and sterile to use is invaluable to some people. Yes. So not everybody has a pressure cooker, not everybody has a way to clean up the media. So, for us to provide, just the general public with several applications and ways for them to take home, grow and cook, mushrooms, and then, on the website, there's tons of recipes and things like that. Me as a chef, I'm always sitting there talking food with people and ways to cook and things along those lines. So
absolutely. I think that's that's the coolest part of it is you can just really kind of attack this from any way that you want to.
Yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah. Honestly,
and you can make mushroom growing fun and easy for everybody and anybody. Whether they're just starting out and they're just curious, or they haven't even started yet and they're just curious, or they've just started, right? Or they're a long-time mushroom grower and they have an idea of what they're doing.
Sure.
You have their bases covered.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's from almost no knowledge of mushroom growing to pretty extensive knowledge. I think we still have a way to kind of help educate people a little bit, with all of our years of experience out there. And for a while, it seemed, not worth our time and effort. But now just the public demand for the knowledge for mushroom growing and cultivation is so huge right now that, it's just, it feels good to kind of pass on everything that we've been doing and learning. If for nothing else, for everybody to realize how difficult mushroom growing can be, just to give us a little bit of validation. It's like any industry, to grow one of anything is easy. To grow many of anything is a whole different story. So
absolutely, it's not just simple multiplication.
Right. All of those expansion factors and, again, there's so many different intricacies with growing mushrooms that are unique to mushroom specific, but are also familiar to other industries. So if you've ever grown plants, there's still familiarities. If you've ever brewed beer or made cheese or done any of these kind of controlled biological fermentation processes, you'll see a lot of similarities, Yes. And so it's not like it's completely unfamiliar to anybody getting into it, but there are certain aspects of it that are very difficult, like the media sterilization and all that. So, and that's what the classes are good for. And Mushroom Church is to kind of give people ideas on how they can get around and approach their projects, reasonably.
Yeah, I was going to say that's exactly why we decided to start Mushroom Church, right? Is to help pass along that knowledge. I really think that the spirit of our community, just for growing, right? Whether you're comparing tomatoes with your neighbor,
exactly.
Whether you're comparing buds with your buddies, right? Or you're comparing your caps, right?
Yeah, right. Yep.
So it's the pursuit of knowledge, it's the exchange of knowledge, right?
Oh yeah.
And so having something like Mushroom Church where people can really get an in-depth, right, look into what it takes and to be able to walk in knowing nothing and to leave knowing too much, right? It's really honestly an exciting thing. And it was, that's why we wanted to start Mushroom Church, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it doesn't do any good for me to just sit on all of this information, and for me to be able to sit there and share with everybody. Again, who knows who is going to discover something fun, cool, new, interesting, because they came here and learned how to inoculate their own grain spawn, 5 years from now. So it's just, it's exciting to be doing something relatively new and unfamiliar to people. Just like you said, cannabis industry in the 90s. If you were there and you were present when, all these things were evolving and changing, industry standards were starting to get set, back in the day, that's really where the mushroom world is now. There's a network of small scale growers around the country, about my size. There are a few really big industry leaders, but other than that, it's home growers. It's small scale local people that are turning their basement bathroom into a little lab facility, or setting up a couple grow tents to grow 30 pounds and sell at a farmer's market like I used to do. So
definitely, we see people all the time that are coming in for grow tents for mushrooms, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if I was starting out and I could have bought pre-sterilized media and went and got 10 blocks of, as opposed to the hours worth of labor, in the relatively small scale, it would have been exponential.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's kind of the exciting thing is just who's driving this right now, and it's really us that's driving the car and moving that vehicle down the road. And so everybody and anybody who can get on, really should be, because it's really, it's open right now.
There's no disadvantage to everybody learning about mushrooms and how to, in my opinion. You know, people are like, well, aren't you going to make competition? Maybe, sure. What does that do? That forces you to grow and change and do everything else. Listen,
innovation.
There are several other growers in the city. We are all friends now. We are not competition. We share with each other. We are a mycelial network with each other. If somebody is short and I have extra, they get it. You know, it's the same thing with most growing communities, and you feel it. You feel it as somebody, you know, that is trying to get this information out to people. The wanting for it, you know, and the wanting for that information, and the sharing, that not the, you know, anything else. It's a good feeling to be able to educate people on it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's always been our philosophy here at GrowActive, is that we want to make sure that everybody is as educated as possible.
Yeah. Right.
It's about sharing the knowledge. It's about sharing those ideas, right, and so that somebody else can take that concept and run with it. The Grow Shop, in my opinion, has always been the counterculture headquarters. It's where that knowledge gets exchanged, right?
Yeah.
And so to be able to bring it into something new is really, really exciting. And like you said, you know, I've had customers of mine years and years and years ago that have gone on and opened up their own shops.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's really cool. It's not a competition.
No,
right?
No, I mean,
I'm so excited for those people who go out there and follow their passions and want to live out their dream.
Yeah.
And it forces all of us to step up and to keep going.
Yeah.
Right?
And you never know. You could learn anything from that person in a couple of years. You know, that's the biggest thing, is like, you could just spreading the knowledge, meeting the people helps you grow. And if you you know, if you can't see that, then you're just not doing the right thing.
Yeah,
so,
like I hope that every customer grows better than I do, because then that means that I've
you're
done
a good teacher. You're
absolutely
a great teacher.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not a competition; it's a community.
Right.
Right. And so that's what really this stuff is all about.
Sure.
Right. And so again, it's not about the competition. It's not about, you know, keeping these secrets to yourself. I want to share every and all secrets with people, just like you do, and just create better growers and to keep pushing forward, because that's what, you know, when it comes down to it, we're both science nerds, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and the more people that share our mindset, the less in the dark or gray area any of this is. You know, the more commonplace everything that we're doing it becomes. The more people know about it, the less fear that's involved with growing mushrooms, the, you know, less stigma and all that kind of stuff. So just to give people aware of, you know, the mindset change and everything,
and the potential.
Yeah,
and again,
absolutely.
It mimics the cannabis industry so much, in the sense that we go back a few years. I mean, we go back 4 years here in Missouri, right? And we didn't have medical.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And now it's a perfectly acceptable thing in most places around the state, right? Everybody is growing their own. Everybody's going to the dispensaries, where, you know, a couple years ago, it wasn't like that, right? And there's that stigma that's been attached that has been coming off for years and years and years, and it's helped drive the people who need it to want to try it.
Yeah.
The older people sometimes, or
absolutely.
younger people. We all grow up with you know, ideas that things are a certain way, and then being able to show people that things aren't always exactly what they seem to be.
Absolutely.
Is exciting.
Well, and this book I just read, you know, there's a term called mycophobia, and this has been for centuries. You know, this goes beyond legal limitations and statutes and people's mentality on legalization. Mushrooms have been the most mentally demonized food throughout centuries, because they kill people. Some of them kill people. And so there are cultures that are so mycophobic, much like the United States, relatively, you know, obviously it's waking up, but just to get over that mental stigma of, you say mushrooms to people and you get one of two reactions. It's usually a big smile or a poo-poo face, you know. And there's really not much in between. And that's, you know, if you go to Asia, mushrooms are everywhere. You know, it's not even thought of. It's in medicine, it's in food, it's in all of these products that you use on a daily basis. And it's been like that for so long. But you go to a more mycophobic country like the United States that likes to keep things clean and sterile, and, you know, ferment is bad and all of these kind of mindsets. So just to be able to get over and get people to try different mushrooms that had this, stigma, or just the fact that there's a brighter light shined on mushrooms now than just this kind of subcategory of food, sitting over here that only weirdos like to try and go out in the woods and find, like I said, just the general concept and mentality for people nowadays is just opening up to it. So they're kind of leaving this mycophobic stigma, and education absolutely helps everybody get over it. So it's just...
Definitely. I think that's also the cool thing with Mushroom Church, right?
Yeah,
it's helping breaking that stigma and help bring it into all worlds, because we're not just covering culinary,
right?
We're not just covering psychedelic, right? It's all one, right?
Yeah.
And so
whether you like this growing mushrooms for the hobby, for the food, for you just go out in nature and take pictures of mushrooms. It's just there's something settling about it nowadays that feels good. And Mushroom Church and the education part of it is just it makes me feel satisfied after doing this for 8 years, relatively behind the scenes on my own, with just a handful of employees and chefs knowing who we are, to get out and meet the everyday growers now. So
definitely. Well, I think things are actually getting a little antsy out there.
I was going to say. So might want to go talk to them a little bit.
Definitely. So why don't we wrap this up? Is there anything that you want to say before we get out of here? Anything at all about?
No, I just appreciate everything that GrowActive's always done. You've always been a big helper in spreading the word on mushrooms. Being a more plant-driven grow shop in the beginning, and kind of lending us a little piece of your setup, has been great. And, other than that, if anybody wants to learn more about mushrooms, find us on, whatever social media and all that. We're Mushrooms Naturally. So
definitely. Well, man, thank you, because, you've supported us too from the very beginning, right?
Absolutely,
so there's a reason why one of the first racks when you walk in is the Mushrooms Naturally rack, right? So
that weird eye-catching effect.
What you guys are doing is very cool, and we want to definitely be one of the biggest supporters of what you're doing and help keep pushing you forward. And so thank you for just doing what you are doing. The team out at the farm is awesome. And everything that you guys do, you're just crushing it. Everything, again, from the culinary world, right, to the grow shop world, the way that we're building the soil, right, getting everything tested before anything's bagged, right. You go above and beyond to make sure that extra step of quality is there, and that's very important.
I appreciate it.
Man, well, thank you very much. And let's get started with Mushroom Church. Everybody, thank you very much. I guess I got to do the normal YouTube stuff. So comment, subscribe, follow us, do all those different YouTube-y things that you do. We're still trying to figure them out as we're getting going. But thank you everybody for joining us, and hope to see you at the next Mushroom Church. Peace.